Next up is the panel on advocating AI for good in Asia. We will discuss how Asia can influence the positive change in the global AI for good conversation through regulatory frameworks, innovation, and strategic investments. The panel will also identify multilateral initiatives that Asia should prioritize, fostering collaboration among regions around the world. It gives me great pleasure to invite our panelists up on stage. We have first the moderator, Mr. John Chai, partner of Sparkplot Capital. Please come up on stage. And next up, we have Bill Huang, Chairman and CEO of Data Robotics. And Prof. David Lee, Chairman, Global FinTech Institute and Professor of SUSS. And Dr. Yo Yang, Chairman and President, HPC AI Tech. And of course, Dr. James Ong, Founder and MD of AIII. Let's put our hands together and welcome the panelists up on stage.
Sorry, we just lost another guest. Just one or 2 minutes. If he not come, then we just kick off. Okay. Hi everyone. I'm the moderator of this panel. My name is John. I try to keep less and more. I think I just talk less, but let my panelists talk more. We kick off with the self-introduction. Everyone here. Sorry. Oh, David, come in. Sorry.
Do we have Prof. David Lee up on stage right now as our panelist? Thank you.
I think every panelist here are legend, right? They have a very interesting story. So first, let them introduce themselves about your own self and your organization. Just like 1 or 2 minutes.
So I'm Bill Huang. I'm the founder and the CEO of Data Robotics. We are 80 years old, 1,000 employees. Mostly we are currently residing in China, Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen, Chengdu. So we develop end-to-end product for cloud robotics. So since earlier I made already a speech. So our vision is to build family nanny robots and deliver them to every home. So we hope to accomplish that by year 2025.
My name is David Lee. I'm a professor at the university, as well as the chairman of the Global FinTech Institute. My area is mainly everything from, I say, A, B, C, D, E for FinTech, sometimes up to F and G, and A is obviously AI, and the rest like B is blockchain, C is cloud computing, D is data analytics, E is environmentally friendly technology, F is financial inclusion, and G is communication. So that's the kind of research and also the education and investment that I do.
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Yang, so I'm a professor at the National University of Singapore. I'm also the founder of HPC AI Tech. So HPC AI Tech is a startup for building efficient infrastructure to help industry to train, fine-tune, and deploy AI models. So we hope we can reduce the training cost of ChatGPT from $20 million to $1 million.
Thank you. My name is James Ong. I'm founder and managing director of Artificial Intelligence International Institute. It's AIII. We are a think tank that was started 7 years ago, inspired by actually at World AI Conference in Shanghai to advocate sustainable AI for humanity. So this particular conference, AIMX, was a collaboration that we've been working together and incubated for the last 3 years that actually resulted in today's conference today to bring the whole ecosystem in Asia, South Asia, Europe, US together to have a multilateral dialogue and conversations to advocate sustainable AI for humanity and AI for good as well. Thank you.
Actually, this morning we mentioned the AI for good, how the morning, right? What are the real Asian mindset to embrace AI for good? Comparing to Western culture, what is any uniqueness of the Asian perspective? Maybe start from James.
Sure. Interestingly, I spent quite a lot of time in China working on the AI standard in China for the last 6 years, because that's the time China needed some contribution with a different point of view. So I think the Asian having born in Malaysia, also growing up in Singapore, about 20 years in the US, in Austin, Texas, then another 20 years in China, I have a pretty balanced perspective about all this, and I feel that every system has its own pros and cons. But I felt that in the case of Asia, we take a more pragmatic approach. Of course, pragmatic approach may be different in China versus Southeast Asia. I think in Singapore, we take a different approach where we focus on what problem we can solve in Singapore, then we see how to expand the scope. While in China, it's more like it's very top-down. They decided that these are the problem, deepfake, no. Somebody has to be accountable, right? Then they start to relax the rule through conversation with the ecosystem. While compared to the US, where I think there's a lot we can learn from, which is a different system where they let the industry drive it to the lobbying group and etc. Somehow you end up deciding what you should be doing, not doing. So I think in the sense that Asia, from my perspective, being a Confucius trained person, right? I think the lesson learned of balance or yin-yang is important, because there's no right and wrong. Like what Steve Hauptman had mentioned this morning, there's no right and wrong. It's just a matter of finding the balance based on our situational context as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think if you go to Silicon Valley, for example, the headquarters of Google, you can find almost roughly 70% of 80% of engineers are Asian. We know, so in Asia, so people like doing engineers and building infrastructures. You go to Singapore, Tokyo, Shanghai, so you see. I think that the infrastructure in Asia is very good. So in the future, I think AI should be a very important infrastructure of our future digital society. I think that's definitely a great opportunity of Asia, because Asian people we like build infrastructure, also do engineering. Yeah.
I see the AI as a whole community, and then you can see a lot of Asians are involved in the US as well, in the area, but you can see that in the US is always open source, open AI, open data. It's very open and very fundamental research that you look at, which is what is happening. But on the other hand, you look at in Asia, commercialization is the key. So you see a lot of cognitive AI, you look at a lot of business models, and that is always the starting point. I suppose that's the pros of both countries and or both America and also Asia. But it is interesting to see how this will develop.
So my perspective is, I think the U.S., Western world, in terms of AI, is primarily U.S., maybe a little bit U.K., but not too much from the rest of the other Western countries. The U.S. is currently leading the world in AI. It's pioneering in many advanced technologies. However, Asia, especially China, is very closely behind. If you think about it, GPT, everybody's training GPT, but OpenAI, it's about 2 years ahead. But everybody else is not behind, right? So now it's very difficult to tell who is ahead. It's like who has more GPU is ahead. So there's not much technological difference. It's a computational power difference, right? So that's why OpenAI eventually decided they are not going to be open source anymore. They sold themselves to Microsoft for $10 billion. So they need the $10 billion to buy GPU. Now, Asia is very different. Asia compared to US, especially China, has tremendous manufacturing capability in electronics, in mechanical engineering, and today even in automobile. So I think in robotics, China will lead, the world, and US will be behind. But combined, I think everybody in the world loves robots, especially if you think about it, Japanese. Japanese love robots. I watched so many Japanese robot movies, right? I think the Japanese have the most robot movie, and US has the second most, right? So there are some people, I think especially in the Western world, are more concerned about the danger of AI, which I think is rightfully so. But they are less concerned, for instance, in China, probably less concerned in Japan as well. I do not see that much press. But I think it is very important, as humanity, we need to be concerned. The concern is not to slow it down, not to stop it, but to manage it, right? Personally, I'm advocating for ethical standard, for regulation, for making sure we have safe development of AI and robotics. So I think in that way, a more Confucius society, like James said, is more receptive to regulation, right? So I think we can also lead. Singapore can lead. Singapore is the crossroad, right, of Western world and Asia, can lead in ethical standard in regulation.
Can I add something to, you mentioned about Singapore, right? Singapore is well known in the world for good governance under Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, right? So it's one thing that we have demonstrated in the last 50, 60 years. That is an area we can excel at, even though we are small, right? Of course, big countries have their own interesting challenge. Another perspective is that we're not talking about AI, we're talking about AI for good. It's one thing to do AI. Everybody can do it and make lots of money and create deep fakes, right? But to do AI for good is a very different thing. And in Asian society, right, because I've lived in the US and here, the government play a bigger role in Asia. And in fact, we like to listen to government most of the time, I would say. And we feel that it's guiding us to make some policy that's beneficial to us. Because public good is one of our community kind of consensus that at least everybody must be well. I think that's my perspective. Maybe there's something that Asia can develop differently from the rest of the world.
I think maybe AI for good, just a combination of social science and the deep tech, right? It's not only deep tech. So a lot of people mention the consciousness, mention the Confuciusness or yin yang, right? So my next question is, can Asia drive thought leadership in this space? Bill? Bill can Asia drive thought leadership? I mean, leadership in thought, right?
Yes, I think in terms of the AI regulation, I think Asia certainly has the capacity, the societal awareness to drive and to lead in AI ethical regulation, AI social regulation. One thing I really want to point out is Singapore, as well as China, is a very strong government-led society. So their budget, right? Then government has, research bodies that can be dedicated, and regulations can lead, compared to a more electoral system, which takes many, many years to debate on policies. But in Singapore, in China, maybe the policies is quickly reached some kind of, conclusion. So giving more time for trial instead of giving more time for debate is probably a huge advantage for the Asian societies.
Professor David is the expert in blockchain. Blockchain talking about decentralized, right? So what's your perspective?
Yeah. To your question whether Asia can lead thought leadership in this area, I think certainly it's very important to, there are many, many different technologies. The two that at the front, A and B, are very interesting. And in 2019, 2020, the IMDA of Singapore actually came out with a Services 4.0 report, the roadmap for Singapore AI, blockchain, and big data. And I think in that report, it spells out very clearly the kind of good that technology can do. Obviously, technology is neutral. It is about the human behavior. And as earlier, the rest of the panel members spoken, one way to drive behavior at the very low level is regulation. You can drive it, that's usually after the fact, in the sense that we have certain regulation and you don't conform, you will actually be punished, or you have to pay a very high cost for the kind of business that you do. But at the higher level, if it's Confucius thinking that we're talking about, thought leadership, it's about ethical behavior. It's about having a set of principles. And the MES in Singapore actually has came out with a set of principles called FEAT, F-E-A-T. F for fairness. So when you do AI, you have to be fair. E is equitable. And then A is that the code has to be auditable. And T is to be transparency. So you're talking about thought leadership. Actually, in some ways, Singapore has been working very hard over the last few years, not only from the community, but from the regulators that we're trying to push ahead with some guidelines to see how we can do that. Because even you can audit the codes just after the fact. Even it's being transparent, you still can do things because we are in the open sea. That is an open sea, you can do anything. So maybe blockchain can help it. Blockchain can help it because it's immutable, because then you collaborate and you increase the cost of hacking, because in order to take control a centralized system is a lot easier. So Singapore is also working a lot onto the blockchain for it. Basically, AI is just about operation efficiency. And blockchain is about collaboration efficiency. How can we collaborate with a set of offline rules that all of us are the guardian of the system? That nobody can access to the data, nobody can change the code without us all knowing, because it's immutable and we have to go for consensus to do that. So some of the things that Singapore is doing is along that line, that increase the cost of hacking, right? Increase collaboration efficiency, and hopefully it will lead to a long-term operation efficiency. That's the kind of philosophy in Singapore that we're talking about.
Yeah, so I think for now, so the real leader in AI should have the best foundation model. For example, today the best foundation model is GPT-4 or GPT-5. So today, I think there are some foundation models proposed by Asian tech giants like Baidu, Huawei, or similar tech giants. But I think none of them can claim they are better than GPT-4 or GPT-5. I think it can still take some time, probably 2 or 3 years, to hopefully we can see maybe there is a good foundation model in Asia. I think that's the most important thing for leadership, because only Asia can have a very powerful foundation model. Can we use this foundation model for different applications, different domains? As Bill mentioned, so to build this foundation model, we need GPU powers. We need powerful AI chips like a GPU. However, now it's very hard to get a GPU, for example, in China. But Huawei is also working hard to build their own chips. I think it can take maybe 3 or 5 years. Hopefully, Asia can also have a very good foundation model like GPT-10 or GPT-11.
I want to first say Professor David Lee is definitely a thought leader in Singapore for many, many areas. That's one thing I want to say. Professor Yu is a young talent in Singapore, one of the also thought leader technology-wise in terms of infrastructure. I just want to mention that. Now, on this topic of thought leadership, here's my perspective. I'm an Asian myself, Okay, Confucius has a saying called 修身齐家治国平天下. Before you talk about thought leadership, we need to make sure we have our own reflection of we can do better. I'm going to give a very self-criticism kind of perspective as an Asian. I think our Asians are very pragmatic, We want to focus on the bottom line, very pragmatic. We also conservative. We don't speak out as much in terms of thought. Thought leadership, you need to articulate, right? You need to go and speak out, even though you may face the danger of people disagreeing with you, which is something I think we have a lot to learn from the American, because I live there. Steve, I talked to you about it. Lots to learn from the Texan, because I lived many years there, right? So I think this is one area we need to do better in terms of learning from the West, in terms of how they actually are activists willing to do something even though you may not make money. I think there's something in Asia we need to do better in terms of that area. Then I think we definitely have the intellectual capacity to do that. But we need to make sure that we allocate the time and the sacrifice to do it, which is something I felt we could do better. Now, can we really drive thought leadership? At least that is a journey I myself has gone through in the space of AI, for sustainable AI for humanity for the last 7 years. Today we are AIMX. I can tell you it's a very difficult road, especially in Asia, because we are very pragmatic people in Singapore. We also need to make sure that we don't make mistakes. We need government's help, right? So that is the truth, right? And so I think we need to be more loosened and really thought that we have to do things not just for our home or our country or our region. We need to think how we can contribute to the rest of the world. I think that is where a mindset shift is needed for Asians. And I think if we do that, we can contribute to the world in terms of better use of AI, to world peace, less weaponization of AI in weapon, maybe together resolve the existential threat that we might be facing with AI when it goes rogue one of these days. That's my perspective.
So what kind of cooperation Asia should pursue and focus on among different regions? Maybe you first. Right?
I think this event itself is the beginning of that, because we have been working on it for the last 3 years, working with the World AI Conference and Switch. So to have an AI conference based in Singapore is a first step. Because if you don't have a place to meet face-to-face and talk to each other, you can't build trust, right? Even though you can disagree to each other, but you need to meet and have a conversation. And that has been difficult. And I be very frank, because UK is also holding an AI Safety Summit. At the beginning of the event, it was like, who should we invite? Which country should be excluded, right? So I think that is not a good start. But I think that is where we want to have an event where everybody can come together. We may dislike each other, but we should have a session to talk to each other. And today we are communicating as a group. We have different sessions from Australia, from Europe and Asia, right? So we try to be very open to different perspectives. I think meeting is a start.
Maybe I'll just jump in. Sorry. It's okay. I'll just jump in. So since you are in Singapore and we are in Singapore now, so I'll just sort of share with you more about what Singapore has done in terms of collaboration. So it's usually very difficult to get everybody together to agree to something. Eventually it will, but it takes a long time. So what I'm seeing the Singapore government is doing is that they do a lot of public-private sector project. In other words, to set a standard, what you do is that you work with the private sector, you get the project going, and then you get more countries joining into the project. And by the time you have 5 or 6 or 10 countries joining, you set a standard. You set a standard. Rather than having 10 countries coming together and say, let's do something together. Some countries have to start somewhere. And what I'm seeing Singapore doing is that they have sandbox, they encourage the private sector to come and work with the government on projects, international projects, G2G, and that from there they set a standard so that you converge the profit motives with AI for good. So that you can do well and then you do good. So I think that's kind of philosophy the Singapore government is doing, and realizing that even though this is a small country, but on the internet, if you are doing good, basically, it is borderless. It's only when you infringe on a lot of other countries' interests that you find that there'll be a lot of sanction, there'll be a lot of, or you become so big. So it's much easier for smaller countries to start something. to set a collaboration with a small group of private sector and then move on to cross-country, cross-border, and then have a standards of professional practice and then a standard for technology. So I think that's one way that I see Asian countries are doing.
Yeah, so I think so Singapore should build a supercomputing center. So today for example, supercomputing center with 10,000 GPUs. Yeah, seriously. Yeah. So today we know OpenAI has something like ChatGPT. Also, Google has something like a Gemini. And I think the US has roughly 10 large LLM, large AI models. Even UAE. So I heard a team in Dubai. So they propose something like a Falcon AI model, which actually very good and popular. I think Singapore actually is a larger economy than UAE. So because AI is so important, so crucial in our future digital life, I think Singapore should also build a supercomputing center and build a Singapore AI model. Yeah.
I agree, Professor Yu. Just want to say, I always want to advocate for that.
So Asia is the largest continent, and it's clear that many people agree that the 21st century is the Asian century, right? So we see economic development all over the place. Southeast Asia, Middle East. Everywhere I go, I see people looking up to China example. They say, if the Chinese can do it, so can we, which is true. 40 years ago, China is one of the poorest countries in the world. But today, China is at least one of the probably most advanced country in the world, right? At least, 1/3 of the Chinese have entered, industrial age, and 1/3 of them enter into, middle development country, and 1/3 are still in developing country. But still, 1/3 of China is like 500 million, right? 500 million people developed. So everywhere in Asia, Southeast Asia, Middle East that I go to, and they say, we can do it too. I think that's the attitude that I see. I think it is a tremendous opportunity. Now, what's the collaboration? The collaboration is a scale. I think we need to use that scale, right? I don't know, it's like 40% of the world population, Asia? 40% of the world population. So we can leverage that scale on many fronts, right? So Professor Yo was talking about supercomputing. Agreed. But 10,000 GPUs, too few. 100,000 GPUs seem to make more sense, right? So we need to do that, right? And if all countries work together and develop 1 or 2 foundation models to compete with GPT-5, GPT-6, to compete with Google Bard, I think we can do it, right? And second, since we're going to train such a large language model, we should be able to put every Asian country's language, history, knowledge into this model. So we should be open-minded, having all data equivalence, right? Today, the GPT models are dominated, right, by English-speaking languages. We need to put foreign language, right, Asian language into it, Arab language into it, right? I think that's a very strong area of collaboration, No matter how small an Asian nation, they have culture, they have civilization, but they don't have enough computer scientists. But no problem, we'll help them. We'll help them from Singapore, we'll help them from Beijing, right? So we have a lot of, collaboration in that area. Third, I think in standardization area, we can also collaborate because government regulation is very strong in these countries. So we can work together relatively easily to reach agreement on conformance, interoperability, supervision, and even law, right? So I think it's tremendous, right? There are several very powerful organizations like APEC, right? CPP, like, other Asian-centric economic forums. And I think AI and robotics should become part of the agenda. Yeah.
Thank you. All the Asia faces talking about the AI for good from Asia perspective. But I happen to find a lot of Western people here. Right? Any questions from audience, especially the Western people ask the questions from your perspective? Hoffman? Captain? Any questions? Yeah.
So I'm wondering, especially with China. So China has certain restrictions on data, and you were talking about combining all data from all Asian countries. How would that work if China's part of the mix? Because China's going to want certain restrictions on what the large language model produces. They will want to edit that. So how could you do that? Please answer.
Thank you.
Okay, first of all, I proclaim I'm not a regulator, right? I'm just an engineer, all right? But so I try to answer your question because I have been in China for 16 years. So China's regulation for large language model is to restrict its use and use regulation to constrain how you're going to use it. But how do you train it? No, you can train whatever you want, right? So it's the same as the internet, right? So China also has some regulations regarding to internet, content monitoring and stuff. So I think for training a foundation model, we should be absolutely open for it, right? And I think China will be very open to those ideas.
I'd like to answer this question. I think this question is what I call the AI 2.0 version of the question, because everybody in the audience thinks that everything is machine learning, is data-driven. In AI, there are different theoretical foundations. There is also knowledge-driven AI, there's data-driven AI. Yes, today we have a lot of regulation on data based on the country, right? But one of the biggest data is actually where? In your head, knowledge, right? As you all heard about the AI alignment issue, right? So knowledge is what we are using to clean out the big large language model to get it aligned. So the value is not just in the data in creating it, it's also the knowledge to use to clean it out. So the nurturing of AI is part of the process. So do not just limit to the data creation part. So there's a lot of new opportunity to develop that, I think, in the next wave of AI after machine learning, where we're going to go through a hybrid learning model. Then we won't be talking about data-only problem. We're going to look at knowledge problem. And knowledge is where you cultivate thought leadership, and how do you disciplinarily take your knowledge in your head, make it reachable and usable to train the model to get it aligned. So this is where I see the big opportunity.
So I think my response to that is that data security and privacy, they are utmost important. That's what we believe in the internet, right? It's just that some places, country is the unit. Well, some other countries, maybe America, the individual is important. So it's either individual data privacy or country data privacy. So I think that's the philosophical difference. But today we're talking about advocating AI for good. So one thing to do is that I think we need to spend more time thinking about protecting individual freedom. And that comes from data privacy and as well as security. Without that, there's no individual freedom. And the other thing, that's on the one side. But on the other side, if we want AI for good, then we should drive China, which our 20 million good programmers in the world. India has 4 million, China has 12 million. Our 20 million, 16 million good programmers are all in Asia. So how do we drive this programming power with the raw materials in Asia and Africa towards environmental protection? And no doubt you can see that China national policy is EV and AV, electrical vehicle and autonomous vehicle. And that's perfect for sustainability. So I think the key question for AI for good for the entire world besides your handphone is how do we drive all this talent, 16 million of them in Asia or slightly more, and all the raw materials that can produce all the computation power and the data that we have towards environmental protection. And one area to me, in summary, is EV and AV. And I think that will happen in Asia.
You're young, the expert, technical expert, right? You can answer these questions.
Yeah, I think speaking of data, actually we already have enough data on internet. So the way why ChatGPT is so good is because they hire lots of people to process the data. But I think the concern is, for example, the large countries in Asia like China, Japan, so maybe China only care about the Chinese GPT, Japanese only care about the Japanese GPT. I think Singapore, because Singapore population is more diverse, Singapore probably is the best nation to build a very universal GPT for Asian people. Yeah.
Can I have one comment? I mean, on this, I think there's a lot we can learn from this guy called Wayne Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky, one of the hockey greats in Canada, right? He talked about you should go where you hit the buck too, right? I think when we are looking at AI, we are looking at what happened today. But we should see where AI is going to be heading in the next 3 to 5 years. Whether it's about consciousness, about where the robotics is going to be humanoid, rather than just today's problem. And I think that's where in Asia, if we have good governance, we can do a lot faster, potentially, yes.
Okay, due to the time limitation, we try to give the audience some takeaway values, right? So please give one personal advice to the audience in one simple statement, how to act for the AI for good. Bill?
I think the most important thought for all of us is we need to embrace this time. I have read a number of articles written and spoken by Microsoft CEO. He said, we need to redo everything that have ever been done. I think that is the right, vision, the right thinking. So all of us are in business or in government service. We used to think digitization, right? We want to digitize everything. Now, we need to rethink, AI. We should rethink everything, not just in terms of digitization, but in terms of AI. And how do we leverage artificial intelligence for all our future business or our future work?
Thank you.
Yeah, I just have one word, ethical design. So whatever we do with AI, we need to work it from the ethical perspective. So when we design something, we always must have the ethics behind so that wherever design, whatever products will come out, is always start with ethical design.
How about let me ask ChatGPT? Okay. Hello, ChatGPT. Can you give Asian people a suggestion how to work with AI in the future?
That's a topic gaining a lot of traction. Working with AI can offer numerous benefits, from boosting productivity to helping with complex problem solving. How you can leverage AI largely depends on your field and goals. Would you like to dive into specific recommendations or explore general guidelines for collaborating with AI?
That makes sense.
This is unfair, using augmented AI to help him, right? That is going to be very tough for me to top that. But I think human intelligence is still going to be better than ChatGPT. My answer is very simple. Having been a human being, gone through AI, in the last 37 years, myself since the 80s. I would say if humanity really want to benefit from AI, we should not just ask what AI can do for you. You should ask what you can do for AI. Because you need to take this into your own action, because every day, each one of you are generating data. Those data will be pumped into his colossal AI, we train for it. If you don't do something about it, the AI is going to turn bad. May not be rogue, but it can turn out bad. So it may turn out rogue, then there's nothing we can do about it. Then we need David to fix the problem using the blockchain technology. How's that?
So actually, famous Chinese saying, 君子信非义也，善假于物也. That means the wise people know how to leverage different resources to make him a better self. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much. And shall we have the panelists come forward to take a picture very quickly? A group photo. The photographers are coming towards you. Please take a picture. John? Thank you all panelists for the fruitful discussion on how we can advocate AI for good in Asia. Thank you.